So we went to Tryon Creek today, and he ran probably, we went about 1.8 miles total today, and he ran almost the entire way out. I'd say at least 3/4 of the 0.9 out he ran, and
Wow.
I was half of it was uphill, so I was actually kind of impressed. And
Yeah.
the way back was mostly walking at a much slower pace. He was tired, but 1.8 miles today. So
Were you hoping to get him to 2?
no, I was amazed at how much he had ran on the way out that I decided to GPS clock it on the way back, and then I was like, okay, I'm impressed with how much he ran.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot for a youngin like that.
Yep, and just choosing when to run himself. Other than when I walked in front of him to like get the front video, but he didn't like it, so maybe he's already competitive. Didn't like me ahead of him. So,
Yeah.
but I think I'm actually going to be able to tie in a couple things with his mindset today to our chat. You know, we're gonna talk about Curtis Beach, our conversation with him, and mostly focus on the mental aspects of it. He talked a lot about just the mental game, you know, and I guess on that note, I'll let you kind of start talking. You have a background in you know, the clinical psychology. Is that the specific or?
So I have a clinical license in social work,
Okay.
which, yeah, it's like I took psychology classes in undergrad, and but then kind of, well, I did a internship after or in graduate school, and then became a therapist, and so yeah, mental health is my background, besides coaching.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, when I was looking through notes, there was a little bit on the more physical side that Curtis said explicitly, which I thought was kind of cool. Some cool stuff that I'm sure we'll touch on.
Mm-hmm.
But the bulk of it was mental, and how that relates to the physical performance side, which was really cool.
Yeah.
It was very, he's very engaging. He was very honest. He was very,
very real.
very real, very authentic. And one of the coolest things about that was that it felt so applicable to what, I think everybody is experiencing now. Anybody who's an athlete or a coach or somehow involved in sports is dealing with. So I think it was cool that we got to talk to him and these topics.
Right.
So yeah, the first thing that jumped out at me was really about, well, kind of the physical was, he started off saying, I think the first thing he said was, that you talked to him about that 1500 of his where he was with Ashton setting, Ashton set the world record. And the challenges of the decathlon being like, it's 10 different events.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. You have to spread your attention pretty broadly, pretty thin sometimes. And so one of the first things I remember was he said, you really have to focus on what you're doing while you're doing it. I actually had a moment, I couldn't place the quote when he was talking about that, but I figured it out later. It was actually from Star Wars. It was something Yoda said to Luke about, and I wrote it somewhere, but it was always looking at the future, never where he was, what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And I think so often we as, athletes who want to achieve big things, we're always focused on like, okay, so what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And what was really cool to me was the way that Curtis answered a question from one of our decathletes, because we had the whole track team there. in this talk, and he said, how do you deal with setback if you didn't have a great performance, in a particular event? And he kind of said, you kind of just have to like put it in a box and move on, because if you fixate on, oh, this didn't, that didn't go very well, and now I can't do this, and then if I don't do that, then this won't happen, and then I won't, you just kind of fall into this negative spiral, which, is hugely sets you back. So, putting it in the right context of like, yeah, that didn't go the way I wanted it to, but I still have to keep going. Which kind of also, he mentioned something about Shalane and her way of viewing or approaching, I guess, perfectionism, which is a problem that we all experience. I think we always want to do the best. High achieving people want to have, you want to get the A, you want to win the race, you want a PR, you want to, whatever. But, what is the best outcome, and then what is a good outcome, and then what is, the minimum outcome? And that way you're never really disappointed.
Yeah.
Just trying to keep a positive spin on things. It was really cool to hear that.
Yeah, I think relating to the decathlon and the 10 events and kind of having to, put things in a box. I like that he said, put it in a box and not move, not put it behind you, because it's going to be important to address it later. It's important to take any positive or negative and analyze it, but it has to happen at the right time. You shouldn't be analyzing during a race. And a lot of times, we have that vision of what, visualize your goal, visualize the perfect race, visualize what you want. And oftentimes when we set goals, we only set that one, or perhaps if we're setting a season goal, we might set, here's what we expect to hit, but here is a reach goal, as some might call it. Well, it's important to do that in the races too, as you mentioned. You can't set yourself up for failure or success based on one idea, because we always talk about there's so many uncontrollables. We don't have control of these things in a race. So it's important to have, goals that kind of match different scenarios that might pop up, even if you are focusing on doing the things you can control. You need to have, they're not outs. They're not, excuses for yourself. Like, well, I'd like to run 2 flat, but 2:02 will be okay. They still have to be, grounded in reason. But, avoiding a all or nothing principle, in your races, because there are so many factors that are uncontrollable by you, is important. And being able to, kind of going back to the box thought, like you can't be analyzing during the race, so you kind of have to do that forethought ahead of time on, these are the things that I would like to happen. These are the things that would be great if they happened, and these would be the things, if everything goes right, can happen. And if you set those 3 goals up for yourself, it might eliminate some of that processing you're trying to do during the race. I was notorious, because I wanted to become a coach. I was notorious for coaching myself during races, out of races, because, probably because I had that, this is my one game plan, I have to execute this. Yeah. And I became prey to myself on analyzing during the race, whereas I think this approach would have been vastly beneficial for me and many others I've coached, that would take the processing out of things during the race. It's in the box for later, and you can you still need to address it. Positive or negative, you need to address it.
Yeah.
I think that's the positive side. You know, a lot of times athletes get, they might PR, but it wasn't exactly what they wanted, and they hold the disappointment. You know, and this is maybe a good way for me to frame why it matters now. But you know, put it in a box, address it, address the positivity, address that you just became better than you ever were before, and find the positives of that. And then, as he related it to one of the Michael Jordan episodes, you know, use the failure or the disappointment or whatever it is in whatever way you need to fuel yourself to be better next time.
Yeah. That kind of going back to what he said about focusing on where you are when you're there, it's all of your feelings or all of your reactions to a situation are all important and valid.
Oh yeah.
It's okay to be disappointed when you only PR'd by 2 seconds and you were expecting 10. It's okay to be a little disappointed and to be happy, and it's difficult, I think, just by our nature, a lot of times, to hold those two things at the same time.
Yeah.
And so that's where Curtis's suggestion of put this one in a box and don't just move past it, like you said, it's let's set it aside for now. Let's go ahead and celebrate with my coach or my team, or in his case, as he was talking about with, the decathletes that do they'll do a victory lap together often. And he described it as a band of brothers kind of thing. So it's let's all celebrate just finishing the event, which it's quite grueling, just to do it. And then afterwards, what can I do to get better? You specifically, it's best, I think, to not analyze, because analyze is mental. It's not emotional. Analysis is not, it's not a feeling, it's a thinking process. And so, whatever you feel in that moment, if it's excitement or disappointment, that's totally separate. It's important to feel it and acknowledge it. I think the word I wrote down when he was talking about that was honor it. And then later, when you go back to, I don't know. I mean, I think back to high school. I used to do that. If I had a good race or even a bad race, it was just like, whatever happens for tonight, it happened in the day, I'm going to deal with that tomorrow. And it was the next day that I would wake up and think, okay, what was that? What do I want? Was that good enough? Was it not? Was there something I could have done better? And just giving time for all of the feelings to come and go.
Well, there's the challenge in it, because couple things. One, on the team aspect and an individual aspect, a lot of times you might have a terrible race, but the team did great. So how do you address the dichotomy at that time, or vice versa? You did great, the team did terribly. Like, how do we process that? That's definitely a challenge. But what you were describing there, the difference between analyzing being a thinking thing and the emotional side of things, a lot of times we, especially as coaches, tell people now's not the time to think about it, you're being too emotional, or that's terrible, that's the worst way to say it, but your emotions are clouding your judgment right now. And that, as a coach, you have to be careful that you're not telling the athlete their emotions are bad.
Right. And
as an athlete, you have to hear it, not that, well, coach told me to not be emotional about this, because your emotions are part of the analyzing process. And you have to, as you said, honor the emotions, know what they are, go through them, positive or negative. Again, the challenge of doing that within the team environment based on relatively, you can't get selfish with your emotions spreading. They still have to be yours.
Mm-hmm.
But it is important to have them, and it is important to be able to go through them. And because you have to know what you feel relative to what you're then going to analyze. So, I know that I'm very much the thinker part, and I try to get the emotion out of it quickly, but it's not that I don't care about the emotion or don't want people to feel valid with their emotion. I think I do a very, very good job of putting it in a box very quickly. So I might see the athlete's emotion and I've put it in a box for when I'm going to analyze it. I know this emotion is tied to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I need to do a better job of relating to that athlete. Have your emotion. It is okay. I've not forgotten about it, but I have put it up here because right now the emotion is not what I need to be processing.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think part of that is just the difference in role between being a coach and being an athlete, or even a teammate. Being the coach, you're responsible for everybody. Whereas as a teammate, you're responsible for yourself and a portion of the team. And I think you hit the nail on the head that it's hard for athletes to balance. If the team,
my box feels big because it's the team, and so yours is a small piece. For each person, your box feels the biggest, and you are in your box. It feels like the biggest thing, but you don't realize how this box affects all the boxes next to it. So
exactly, yeah. And I mean
that's all perspective.
Yeah, it's challenging for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of, another thing that stood out to me about this, which Curtis was explicit about, was bouncing back from injury and kind of dealing with the emotions involved in that, which, I briefly touched on this after one time we had a conversation. I said, in my experience working with people in mental health, a lot of times they experience, and tying it back to kind of athletics, it's, if I'm an athlete, that's part of my identity. And if I'm injured, I can't do the sport that I want, or that defines who I am. So that becomes a threat to how I see myself.
Mm-hmm.
It can often lead to, feelings of depression, sadness, anxiety. And again, kind of like we were talking about, you have to honor that feeling for what it is. But also, I think actually the word I wrote when Curtis was talking about it was mourn. You have to mourn the loss of, in the most recent example, it's like you got to mourn the loss of the season.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay and good. But like we were talking about with the box, you have to put it in its context. It's okay to vent. I think you wrote that in one of your notes that you sent me, was vent.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. But again, you have to be cognizant of, is this my box? And how is it affecting my team? Is it affecting my community? Is it affecting something else? But I don't know if you had any thoughts on the injury specific talk he had given us.
Yeah, I think let me find my notes on it. I think the thing that he mentioned was having unconditional confidence in the plan, and that there are going to be different roads to get there. And what he was referencing, I guess this might help us shape the talk here, is he was talking about how he felt he didn't go through the grieving process of being injured. He went from being one of the best guys of his age group to one of the best guys in college to one of the better pros, top 10 in the U.S., fourth at the indoor worlds, you know, to being injured where now he's not even the guy, and that was his identity struggle there. But the challenge of how to approach the workouts and the emotions of being injured and not being able to do exactly what you're doing, and just you know, I feel like we need him to like fill in the blank here. It's like I'm missing a little gap here, but he shared the importance of finally going to talk to someone about it. And I know I asked him, you know, is it important to have someone outside your coach? You know, because coaches, we want to be that everything. You know, I know psychology, I know physiology, I know this, and because I'm working directly with you, I know the whole you better than anybody else, and so we get a little bit selfish with that. And taking this back to early in my career, I would feel threatened by other people getting involved. Because I felt like anything they were doing was out of the context of the whole. And so I felt like anytime I was trying to help somebody through an issue, if somebody else came in, they didn't know, like a trainer, like they don't understand the type of surfaces we're running on daily. I have that all up here. So that's not exactly the problem, or that's not the way to solve it. So I would get defensive with trainers. I would get defensive with you know, assistant coaches, because you know, I'm around them more. I have the big plan in my head. I know this more. And I'm still a young coach, but as I've become an older coach, a little more experienced coach, I'm way less threatened by all those other pieces being involved. And I'm way less threatened by an assistant coach like you. I think is very important that they have that, you know, that assistant coach, that other person that has a different view. But specifically, Curtis mentioned having somebody outside your coaching circle being important, because of it's a safe space. It's like anything an athlete says to me is in confidence, but there still is some slight you know, go back to a Seinfeld reference here, worlds colliding. You know, there's a slight chance of something that person said to me spilling to another athlete, you know, or me using it as a reference, or you know, a mental note as I'm talking to someone else, even if I don't specifically identify. There's always that threat. So speaking with a teammate, you know, there are huge benefits to speaking with teammates and things you use them for and talked with them about. But there's also that threat that what you're saying isn't in 100% confidence. And so there's, you might not be fully real with them. You might not be willing to bear all, because it, as he had mentioned, it's not a completely safe space. But having that person completely removed from the situation, while initially my thought is they don't have the full context, sometimes the full context will cloud your judgment. So it can be great that you have somebody outside your coaches to speak with, outside your teammates to speak with, that can help you really probably deal with the emotions of things the best. And
I mean, to point back to my experience in that, I used to have a pretty common way of talking about why it's important to get an outside perspective. There's this feature actually, and it's, you know, if you take your finger and you go closer, closer, closer right here, you can't actually see this point because it's too close. Literally. And it's because of the way your eyes and your brain all operate. And so getting someone who's a little bit further removed can give you a better perspective in, you know, sort of figurative and literal sense. You know, someone who's outside of your circle. And, you know, it's not...
And it's way safer because there is no chance of the worlds colliding. And, you are more likely to be completely open and honest with that person and not feel any threat of ramifications of disappointment or feeling inferior, or usually most of the negative feelings associated with it.
Right, and the big reason for that is if you're seeing a professional, then they're bound by laws. you know, like they don't want to get sued, they don't want to get fired, they don't want to get in trouble. In a way that it's not so much that coaches. I don't want it to sound like coaches are, they're just going to go around talking about your stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just we don't have the obligation as a coach to keep it private, which is definitely the case with a therapist or a counselor or a psychologist. They have to keep it confidential. So, that's the upside, besides just having an outside perspective and, maybe not having the emotional component of, as a coach, sometimes we put undue pressure, even unintendedly.
Absolutely.
Because I know that you want this. I want this for you too. And we might push too hard on something that we probably shouldn't, because we are close with our athletes. We want them to be successful, and we know that they really want to be successful themselves too.
Yep.
And so sometimes getting a trainer who doesn't know and doesn't really have any other motive except I want you to be healthy, or a psychologist whose only job is to make sure that you are well mentally, physically, there's an upside to that.
Yep.
And
And he said, he said that he sought out help kind of without really thinking he had a problem. And what he found very beneficial about that, and what he started gaining understanding about, was that usually the problems you have are problems you're not aware of. And it's because we all think in a particular way, we all operate in a particular way, and for the most part, people largely believe they are doing the right things, and they are, most people don't actively choose to do destructive things or negative things or sabotaging things. That's way more rare. So in general, we believe we're doing the right things. We don't think we need help because we're in our lane and we're looking this way. So he talked about the benefits of seeking out help, kind of regardless of who you are, because the problems you have, you're generally not aware of. And so seeking out help is a great way to have somebody from that outside perspective.
I remember what I wrote when he said, I sought help even when I thought I was doing pretty good. I wrote down, good can get better. Just because things are good doesn't mean that they can't get better. So, kind of going back to I think our conversation a few weeks ago with Dom, it was, I remember thinking like, okay, so you do all the physical stuff, you train really well, you do this, what else? You can improve your nutrition, you can improve your recovery, you can improve your mental state, and that's only going to help you as an athlete. It's going to help you to be able to train smarter, better, recover better. And so, I don't know. I mean, I thought it was cool to hear that from, one of the world's best.
Yeah.
To say that, I want to be better, and this is the way that I chose to work on that. Super cool. One of the things that he said also really helped him was journaling, which is a way that actually does help people to kind of, if some people are still not comfortable with the idea of, okay, I'm going to go talk to someone, journaling is a good way to start doing like self-help. Because if you write down something, it then is no longer just in your own head. It's actually outside of you if you think about it physically. Like, you've taken the time and the energy to write it down. It is no longer just in your head. It's actually out in the world. And
Becomes more real.
it becomes more real, and then you can actually look at it in a more objective way. So that's a good place to start, if you're hoping to be honest with yourself about what may or may not be a big or a little problem, or an area to improve. I know that we often, as coaches, suggest that for goals, write it down, and then you can really analyze it in a more objective manner and figure out a better plan for how to achieve it. So I thought that was super cool that you mentioned journaling, because it's a more maybe universally palatable sort of approach. Because I know some people, there is still a fair amount of stigma about mental health. And, it's a baby step, I guess, that anybody can do.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't cost money. It doesn't, there's no accessibility issues, which some people, don't have health insurance. They can't go see a professional. Right. They can't afford their co-pays. So self-help is a good place to start, and journaling is a good one for that.
Yeah, and it, like you said, we're not always aware of our own issues, but we're probably more aware than we think we are. Because we probably try to suppress the negative thoughts, and I think even in visualization, one of the techniques is, avoid the negative thoughts. Think only about the positive. Project what you want to have happen. And I remember one of the stories at Steen's running camp that I heard was about a coach that led his team through visualization, but he specifically, as he was going through the race visualization with them, said, "Okay, now you've fallen. How do you get up? How do you get back to your feet? How do you get back to your rhythm? How do you get back focused?" And one of his athletes after the state meet ended up saying, "Coach, like, I felt like as soon as I fell during the race," like his athlete actually fell in the race, said, "As soon as I fell, all of a sudden I felt like everything was at ease," and they didn't just say, "Picture the perfect pace. This is what you want to have happen." So we have those negative thoughts, and those negative things happen to us frequently. But as we said at the beginning, you have to identify it, and you have to address it, and you have to go through the emotion of it. You have to validate it, and then you have to use that to help you move forward. And journaling allows for you to kind of have that stream of consciousness where as you're talking out the whole thought process and writing it out, you might actually let some of those negative thoughts out, and might be able to address them more. And even on the other side, you might have some of those extreme positive thoughts. Like, you might be someone who is critical of your race, of your efforts, and then all of a sudden, well, I guess it was a pretty good race. I did PR. And then you okay, that means it is a personal record. Like, that is literally better than I've ever done before. So, it'll work both ways, but
but to be honest, to be honest, it's about being honest with yourself.
Yep.
It is what it is. If it was a good race, but not your best,
right,
it's good to name it as such.
Yep.
Because then okay, that was really good, and I shouldn't be too disappointed, but it's not my best. And so how do I make the next time my best?
Yep.
Because, that's kind of the whole point of sport, I think, is to push your own limits. I think that's why most of us get involved in it.
Yeah. And
stay in it for so long, I think. So, oh man, there was one thing that you were saying there that I was like, oh, there's gold here. It's kind of in acknowledging your feelings. It's one thing that I often used to tell people is, anxiety. A lot of people hate anxiety, the feeling of anxiety, but it's actually a really valuable emotion, and it's important. It tells you that there's something there. It clues you in that there's something important here. I don't feel ready. I don't feel prepared. I don't like this. I don't want that. Whatever it is, the message, it tells you that there's something to prepare for. And so then you start thinking, okay, what do I do? That's what you were talking about with this coach doing the visualization. It's, how do I prepare for this contingency? If I fall, what do I do? And the resolution or the solution to anxiety is preparation and knowledge. So one of the things I remember, Curtis didn't exactly say something about anxiety, but he said, someone asked him about hurdling, and he said his go-to is intuitive. He's like, I'm not big on steps. I don't count. So he wasn't very cerebral with it. He wasn't thinking about it. It was feeling, which, this last spring I was coaching hurdles, and that was a new experience for me as a steepler. You don't count steps, but it was more. You do think about it when you're training. You think about it when you're practicing. You do analyze each rep. Every hurdle. Was I too close? Was I too far? Was I approaching too fast? Did I go off the wrong leg? But then when you get to the race, you just do it because it becomes muscle memory. And it's sort of, I appreciated him saying that it was intuitive, which a lot of times people think it becomes mystical almost, of like, oh, well, that person's just special. It's like, no, I mean, they are, of course.
Yeah.
But also, it's not just because of that. It's because of the way they prepare.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what can spur people to prepare is that feeling of anxiety or nerves, or I'm not, I don't feel good, so I'm going to go do this thing better. Which is where, I think on the kind of going back to just the general mental side, negative emotion is not always a bad thing. It just clues us in that there's something that we need to work on.
Right. And you got to put that emotion in the box, like, depending on what time it is. Like,
mm-hmm.
if it's practice, that's the time to kind of allow those emotions to come out and allow them to help guide you, towards fixing it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But in the competition, you kind of have to be two different people. In practice is the time to practice, and the time to. There's one clinic I went to where they talked about how at practice you need to be more okay with failure at practice, mm-hmm. and because it's just practice. Like,
yeah.
If you quit thinking of it as running practice or soccer practice, it's just practice. Like, when you first learn how to write your letters, you write big, capital A 100 times across, the sheet, the 5 or 6 lines, and 10 mm-hmm. times across, and you just keep going, and all you're doing is practicing. And if you got upset at the first couple that you wrote, and just dwelled on that, you would never figure out how to write the A, mm-hmm. So you've got to allow yourself right. to just practice and fail, practice and fail, practice and fail. And
well, one of the things that Curtis said was, which I think he said specifically, his psychologist gave him, was and because I know this, you wrote it too, was thoughts are like cars. You don't need to get into each one.
Absolutely.
In writing your letters,
let them have it. Like, let the cars happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can't not.
Yep.
You kind of have to, because you can't control that necessarily. Yeah. The thoughts are going to come. The feelings come up sometimes anyway. But that's where you pick which one am I going to go with?
Mm-hmm.
Do I, did that rep not go right because of something I did, something I can control? Is there something I can change? Rather than just saying, oh, that was just bad. It was bad,
Yeah.
and it was bad and I suck. I'm never going to get this. Like, that's not productive.
Yeah.
That's not healthy. That's not good for you. That's not going to help you to get better. What will help you is to not be too hard on yourself and really look at, well, why didn't that go well? It's okay to mess up, especially in practice. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you're supposed to mess up so that you can understand what you need to not do, or how do you do it right for the game or for the race or for, the time trial, whatever it is. The same thing is true about homework versus tests. You know,
Yeah.
it's better to, you know, go to your professor or your teacher when you don't understand a concept, when you can't do this one problem or you can't get this thing. It's best to go there and talk to them at that time so that you don't fail your test, when it really does matter.
Yeah. Those are all practice opportunities, and you have to approach them like that. You can't, and from the coaching side of things, from my perspective, I can't expect that there's going to be perfection during any of our workouts. I know anytime you introduce a new workout, there's an expected level of some failure. And it's almost, you know, it's almost like, uh, it's almost bad to have the perfect workout, or to have somebody nail it
Mm-hmm.
exactly like you wanted, because, um, it, there's sometimes is less to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just say, well, you did it. Let's go home. You
Yeah.
might say you did it because you prepared well, or you
Mm-hmm.
know, you ate well today, or, you rested well, but there's not a lot to, um, a lot, so cliche, but we learn more from our failures than our successes. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
practice is about. So, give people the opportunity to fail in practice. Don't set them up to fail, but give them the opportunity that failing is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And take, you know, take practice for what it is, and in the classroom, take homework for what it is. It's an opportunity to be frustrated. It's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to get outside your comfort zone of being in your own head, asking for help from the professor. That's, uh, if you want to draw the parallel here, that's, seeking outside help. Seek it with that professor, to try and improve yourself. Going back to his intuition comment, we're intuitive because, again, we think we're doing things correctly. We, if you just kind of get out of your own way and let things
Mm-hmm.
happen, we're more intuitive. But then it's like, as one, on one side of things, as coaches are always telling people to do that. Let it come to you. Let the race happen. Let the run, develop. We're trying to create this intuition, but then seeking outside help is exactly opposite of intuition, because you are having to specifically say, no, I can't just let it happen. I need to have somebody intervene in this process. So it's,
Mm-hmm.
again, it's kind of anti, um, programming, to some
Yeah,
degree.
to some degree, but also coaches, you know, we could try and draw an analogy here. The coach is like the outside help.
Yeah.
You know, you, I think running in particular, like we've talked about, it's not necessarily a skill sport. Like, you can just go out and run.
Yeah.
The reason that people get coaches or go to programs or schools or join teams is so that they get that outside expertise. The same is true about, you know, your mental outlook. You
Which is
don't,
so challenging when
yeah.
people join a team for that purpose,
Mm-hmm.
but then don't utilize that resource. You know, people choosing a school like Lewis and Clark because of the liberal arts aspect of it, the one-on-one, the relationship with the professors, all the things that people say.
Yep.
But are you taking advantage of it as much as you can?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's kind of like we want that comfort blanket of being in the situation we know we want to be in, but then are we a little insecure about actually saying, I need help?
You
And
know,
there's that whole stigma.
yeah, to be honest, you just exactly described my experience in undergrad. And we don't need to talk about my exact grades, but my grades reflected the difference between undergraduate and graduate school. Not seeking help because I felt insecure or uncomfortable as a undergrad, compared to grad school when I developed relationships with my professors. I talked to them. I asked questions. I got feedback on papers, and it was night and day, the difference. So, the amount of success when you really are intentional about what it is you want to achieve, whether it be running or volleyball or sports of any kind or academics, like if you set your mind to it and then you work, and you get help from somebody who knows a little bit more, like you're going to be 10 times better, at least. So
I think it the allowing people to feel good about seeking the help, are comfortable. I mean, some of it is, 18 to 22 and you've gone off to college it's a new scary thing. Generally we always say our juniors and seniors are, the ones we know best, and that's when they start having bigger improvements, and a lot of it's just they become more comfortable with the coaches by then, and same with juniors and seniors in classes. By then you're you're seeking out that help a little bit more. We need to have a better way of making sure, going back to this whole talk and what we've said several times, but tying it into this, we need to make sure that we let people validate their emotions, and that, it's okay to be wrong, sad, scared, anxious, every negative, feeling you have. We validate the happiness a lot, but it's my son today was running down a hill very fast, and it was cute, and then he fell, and he bumped his head, and I think it's very important to let them fall,
yep.
In a safe environment, not off a cliff,
Right.
but let them fall, go to them, and let them cry, let them see that it's okay to be hurt, and it's okay to have that fragility, and that you don't need to say, oh, just, it's okay, just don't cry, you're going to be okay, but let that happen. So same as after bad races or bad workouts, like it's okay, like you can have this bad feeling, this bad emotion, all these things that we are told that are bad, negative. You can have all that, and you're in a safe place. And I think that there's so much programming that is against that, so much fake positivity. Social media is a whole psychology experiment in itself. Do people post exactly what's real, or do they try to post their best moments?
Oh yeah.
And we're programmed one way. There's so much programming going on from birth with anything. I was my son's really, really into Baby Shark song right now.
Yep.
And just when we started singing it at the dinner table or the breakfast table today, he always does Baby Shark and then, Mommy Shark, and then Daddy Shark. And I'm like, we are already programming from this innocent song, programming that a male is more dominant, is bigger, is, like, that's a whole nother topic. But I just
Sure.
wanted to touch on the fact that one of the
Yeah.
cutest songs out there, most watched songs out there, for youth is a programming song. Like it's programming a certain way, and
Mm-hmm.
it just there's so many things that just happen. Not just male versus female, but being able to share emotions. What is okay? What's not okay? I think I've watched a couple of the Mister Rogers movies and documentaries, and they are
Yeah.
amazing. And that dude was just flat out real,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I
Yeah.
just we as coaches we have to do a very uh, a very tough job, but good job of trying to go against social programming and uh, really, really sharing that it's a safe place, that all those things that you want to share are okay, and give people the avenue to do it. Some of them are going to be able to talk to you. Some of them are going to have to journal. Some of them are going to have to seek the outside help that's away from the team and away from the coach. But I guess that's probably the most important thing for us to do as coaches with regard to this is, find how to make each person feel safe and what that avenue is for that person, and
Right.
not make everyone do it the same way.
Right. And to add on to that, one more situation is sometimes people need to struggle and they
Yeah.
need to maybe even fail. If they don't want to talk to us and they don't want to journal and they don't want to see a professional, they might need to go to the point where it becomes a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be their process. But like you said, our job is as coaches is to create the environment and try and make it possible for them to be able to be open and honest and really share and process those feelings and whatever it is that they're scared of or
Yeah.
worried about, or it's
Tough
that's our job.
because we are also associated with the performance, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
oftentimes we are associated as, if I don't perform, I'm disappointing this person, and that is almost impossible to separate from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's almost impossible.
Well,
And go ahead.
that was kind of the issue I heard with Curtis. Didn't exactly say it that way, but it's something that I've noted, which is something I experienced myself. When you don't succeed as an athlete, if that's how you define yourself, is as an athlete. I've always defined myself as a runner. As starting at 7 years old, I was a runner. It's what helped me get into college. It's what helped me, in numerous ways in my life. And then when I stopped doing it, who am I now?
Mm-hmm.
Curtis talked about, okay, I was this, now what? If I can't be a decathlete, what can I do? I don't know if he actually experienced that, but I know for myself that was something that was really challenging for me to go through. Of, okay, so who am I if I'm not a runner anymore?
Yeah.
And precisely like you said with Chase, I think sometimes too much success can be crippling because you don't learn how to succeed in the face of failure, or to how to overcome that challenge. And so, you're right. Programming, like we're programmed to be strong, to be the best, to always succeed. But sometimes failure is necessary to be our best, and we just don't know it until later, kind of want to air one of the comments from our friend Emily here. She said something about, I wish I had known what I knew. I wish I had known in undergrad what I learned in graduate school. Which
I think,
yeah.
Honestly, there should be a bigger emphasis on in younger age teaching on the failure aspect of things, because like everything from like how a cut heals, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We don't spend enough time like actually focusing on that process and the fact that what happens when a cut happens. You put a Band-Aid on it and the body will fix itself. That's Let's focus a little bit more on the damage that happens and what the body needs to do to recover from that and move forward. And from a biology standpoint, plant biology, environmental biology, what happens when there's toxic fumes in the air, what happens, how does it actually get processed? You don't just say a tree photosynthesizes stuff and now you got clean air. Like,
right.
Talk more about the negatives, and I think that will validate a lot more negative things being viewed as less I don't know how to say it, but
it's the flip side. In order sometimes to feel happy, we need to know what sadness is.
Yeah. For sure. We tell people all the time in training, like, you can't get better unless you get worse first. Like, you have to train yourself to get tired, or you train yourself and then you'll get tired, and you'll be able to recover from that, and now you'll be able to be better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly it. And I would say, I think I agree with you on yes, we need to do a better job of changing the programming at a younger age. But I think maybe we do a good job on the physical side of, this is the way a cut heals and this is the way.
Yeah.
I think really what we need to do is we need to teach people how emotionally we heal. And that, as coaches and as parents, in your case and mine in the future, that's what we do, and that's the way we can make healthier people, healthier adults, and a healthier society.
The 7-step process, is not just for Alcoholics Anonymous. If you take away the stigma of alcoholism or whatever might lead someone to having to go to that, it's learning how to deal with a failure on some level. And you have to, I don't know all the 7 steps, but you have to acknowledge it, identify 12. It, go through it. Or 12, but anyway, so, well, we're 30 seconds away from getting booted by Instagram, but I think we've for sure covered everything at a pretty good level. So, thank you for the chat today. And
of course, it was a good one.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to letting everyone watch the interview with Curtis tomorrow at 9 a.m. on all our social media channels. And, we'll talk with you next week. I'm not sure about who, but we'll see you next Friday at 4.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
All right. Bye.
Bye.